Hello and welcome to the Athletic NBA Show. It's Wednesday. I'm Dave DeFore here with Mo DeKeel and Seth Partnow. That means it's Nerder, she wrote. Guys, happy Wednesday.
Not
Hope
a long
everybody's
pause.
doing well.
Not a long pause. That's a bit of an upset.
It was not a long pause, although your Wi-Fi paused on us there. So, I was waiting for a little response. So, guys, anything big happened last night in the NBA?
I don't know about last night, but certainly since the last time we spoke, some things have happened between, obviously Ja Morant being out for the year. Really a scary looking injury for Tyrese Halliburton, though it seems like he avoided the worst of it. It was very reminiscent to me. It was basically literally the first day I was in the Bucks practice facility when I got hired there. They were doing some, preseason workouts, and Chris Middleton slipped on a wet spot and did the splits in a very similar way and tore his hamstring off the bone and was out for 4 months. So
So you're the jinx.
That could be bad. Yes, basically.
You're the jinx. You're the jinx.
Yeah.
You're the guy. Like, I would have looked at you going like, you're fired. Your first day and this happened. No, you're out.
Well, I hadn't been introduced to
though.
a lot of the basketball ops people yet, so it was okay.
So, no. It would have made it easier to fire you. What are you talking about? That makes it even quicker.
Also, I feel like Chris Middleton has done the splits a few times since then. Like, I feel like he's done that in games. I don't know why that pops in my head.
I was doing a playback for that game, and I was watching that on our Nerder stream. And it's interesting because Halliburton slipped up like earlier in that game just on his own, and then did it again there. But when he did the splits, I was like, oh, I knew right then and there. I said, oh man, that ain't right.
Yeah, not a good thing. So Halliburton, though, luckily only going to be out a couple of weeks. Worst news in Memphis: Ja Morant is out for the season. He's going to have surgery on his shoulder, and the gap year for the Grizzlies just gets a little gap year. I mean, I think this in a lot of ways, I'm not going to say this is a positive because it's not. They looked great when he came back. I thought maybe they had a run to the play-in them, which is amazing to say for a team that was 6-19 when he came back. But at the very least, if you're Memphis, the Ja injury now creates a lot of clarity on the rest of the season. It's officially just a lost season for the Grizzlies. So that's kind of a bummer. But good news, Erik Spoelstra is getting paid. 8 years, $120 million. He's now the new highest paid coach in the NBA. We've had 3 records set this year. We had Monty Williams, then we had Pop immediately after that went and got a big fat contract, and now we got Erik Spoelstra. This is a good deal.
Pop steal,
obviously, Pop's the best coach in the league.
Sorry, did Pop steal trump Monty Williams's deal? I don't remember the numbers.
Yeah. And almost immediately after, walked in and said, hey, now I wonder, does Pop go back and say, I'm no longer the highest paid coach in the NBA? Can you guys fix this? Or so Spoelstra signed.
No, because it's Spoelstra.
Right. So Spoelstra signed
he's
another
the best coach
8 year
in the NBA.
Hands down. This is a great deal for Miami. They keep their coach, who I doubt there was any chance he was going to leave. I mean, when he leaves, he's going to replace Pat Riley, I'm assuming. So that's a good contract for Erik Spoelstra. So, guys, I was thinking we should check in on the Los Angeles Clippers. They've been pretty good. They are 20-6 in their last 26 games. As bad as things looked, Mo, to start after the James Harden trade, they have been excellent the last few weeks. This is a team that looks like they are going to be pushing for a title in May and June.
I mean, would that caveat that we always have to say with them, if they're healthy, like this is the one thing with the Clippers, like you really want to believe in them. You really do. You want to say all the things, but it's like, man, but every time they seem close, something bad happens and whatnot and all that. But you have to give them credit because I killed them, Dave, on this podcast, basically anywhere I went on the Harden trade. I thought it was a terrible idea. I thought it was dumb. I was killing them before they made the trade, killed them afterwards. And yeah, I got egg on my face, man. Like, this has been phenomenal for them. Like, James has been great. He's fit the role perfectly for them. He's kind of gotten the offense moving and flowing. Kawhi is playing at like Kawhi levels, and really been phenomenal. Paul George has been awesome. They've done a good job in terms of figuring out the right rotations. Like Ty Lue you have to give him a ton of credit here in terms of figuring this whole thing out and putting the pieces of the puzzle together, and hey, Russ, you got to go to the bench, and Russ in limited minutes is very effective for this team. And then the most important thing too, at the end of all of this, is Harden and Zubac and Theis have figured out the pick and roll together, and they found that chemistry together, and that's been huge for them. Like, honestly, you look at this Clipper team and it's just, really kind of impressive considering what it looked like the first 5 or 6 games with Harden. We were all like, whoa, boy.
Seth, for the season, they're 6th in net rating. They're just out of the top 10 in defense, but they're in the top 10 in offense. We talk about all the time about the importance of being top 10 in offense, top 10 in defense, and how that separates you. I mean, Oklahoma City Thunder, the Boston Celtics, they're in that sort of tier. The Clippers, I think they've got a ways to go defensively. They can be way better than they have been, even. But their offense is they just got so many guys who can do stuff. And it's sort of this thing that we hit on all the time, Seth, where is it bad to have a bunch of guys that can score or a bunch of guys that can drive and kick and drive and pass? They can run out lineups with 4 guys able to handle, shoot, and pass. This team is playoff built.
And the too much ball handling, too much shot creation isn't really a thing. It's sort of are you getting good value for assets to assemble that at the expense of other things? And the Clippers are, in a fairly unique situation in terms of we don't care. We're only constrained by cap mechanics, not anything else. And then I think that we've seen I thought some of the best basketball James Harden played in his career was his first kind of couple weeks in Brooklyn, and he's approaching in a similar way in LA, where he is really willing to be more of I don't want to say a traditional point guard, but more of a distributor, more of a lay back and see and let Kawhi, and Kawhi's cooked this year. And of course, as you mentioned, the other part is their health. It's I was just looking it up through yesterday's games. Paul George is 30th and Kawhi is 49th in possessions played this year. And I think that's a big key to it. This is probably the healthiest Kawhi has been since, and maybe even before he won the title with the Raptors.
This is probably that season before he left San Antonio. I think that he looks as good physically as he has since then. What he's able to do, his rebounding is insane.
But I also don't want to sleep on this is a whole team. Like, this team is actually the deepest team in the NBA when you look at it. Norman Powell comes in off the bench and has been unbelievable. Like, to me, he's not getting talked up enough for a potential 6 man of the year type stuff that he's been doing. You have, obviously we touched on Russ coming off the bench. Terrence Mann has come in and filled a role for them. Like, I think they have a lot, like, they're so deep. They've just told PJ Tucker, you're not playing. And he was terrible for them, but they full on have just said, like, we don't really need you to play. And I think, now even with Mason Plumlee back, they have 3 bigs. And picking up Theis was huge for them at the time. And I think Indiana kind of made a mistake. I think if they held on to Theis, they probably could have spun him off for at least a couple 2nd-round picks in a trade or something like that to a team that needed bigs. But for the most part, though, you look at this team, like, who's deeper than them? Honestly, like, when you just look at it up and down the roster, like, the Celtics are great, top 6. But like 7, 8, 9, okay. I think the Clippers are deeper when you go into that 7, 8, 9 range with them, and I think they have a lot of options there. And those guys come in and they don't take much off the plate when they come in.
I think we need to talk as much as about that depth. I think we need to talk about Zubac and Terrence Mann also. I think that before the season, even before the Harden trade, like, I think one of the things we were looking for is, do they find a way to finesse man in instead of Westbrook, and they've there's some pains to get there, but they did that. And then Zubac is having for a guy who's always been seen as sort of out there, and we worry about him in the playoffs. He is having a great season on both ends of the floor. He's currently 5th in my rim protection metric. Opponents are shooting about 48.5% against him at the rim, which is one of the top marks in the league. So I mean, they're just not just the stars and the depth, but those middle guys also are contributing mightily.
Well, and you know what, Zubac, this might be the best pick and roll partner he's ever had in James Harden. And if you look at his numbers, I mean, he's shooting. This is his best field goal percentage season. He's averaging the most field goal attempts of his career. Obviously, most amount of points. I think Zubac getting unlocked has made everyone else's life easier. Just having a capable pick and roll point guard, and to your point, Seth, going more traditional point guard, setting people up. And then Harden's doing the thing that he kind of did in Brooklyn, where he's ready to close, but he's not the closer for them, right? Like Kawhi is their closer, but James Harden is ready to close. And I think that when you've got that sort of high level offense, I mean, who's the opposing defense best defender going to guard? Is it going to be Kawhi?
No,
when we get playoff time, it has to be Kawhi, right?
It has to be Kawhi. Like you have to kind of lock down Kawhi. But then that means Harden and Paul George get to go after guys 2 and 3. And the other thing that's really interesting with this is, and to go back to James Harden play, he has the lowest usage of those guys. He's at 20% usage. Like, I mean, let go back 2 years ago. Would James Harden if I told you James Harden would have a 20% usage at some point in the next few years, you guys would have laughed at me or thought I was crazy. I mean, this is where we're at right now in the 31 games. Kawhi is higher and Paul George is higher. I mean, he's found a good flow and mix with everything there. And I think a lot of this, again, we got to give credit to Ty Lue and the coaching staff, kind of putting together and figuring out the pieces, not panicking right away when this thing didn't look good, pretty quick, and it looked terrible. And Ty has done a great job.
And this is the first time. Again, I hate to keep dropping this caveat if they stay healthy, but this is the first time that this group, the Paul George, Kawhi, Ty Lue group, will go into the playoffs having some sort of chemistry and continuity. They normally get into the playoffs and they play like strangers. Like they don't know each other. They don't know the plays. And now all of a sudden we're going to have, Kawhi Leonard looks like a top 10 guy. I think he could be the best player in any playoff series if he's going to stay this healthy. Paul George, we've seen him be the best player in playoff series before. We've seen him be the best player on the court with other MVP caliber players before. We obviously know James Harden and his story. They are not just the deepest team in the league. They might have the higher ceiling of any team outside of Nuggets and maybe Celtics.
And they have one other thing that I think is playoff useful. And that's, you talked about putting the best defender on Kawhi. He's for a largely perimeter guy. He is somewhat unique in you don't just need a guy who can stay in front of him laterally. You need a guy who can just not get knocked. I mean, he might be the strongest pound for pound guy in the NBA, just his ability to move people out of the way. And so, can you guard him with a Mikal Bridges, like that traditional sort of lanky wing stopper? I mean, it's a guy he's just going to put in the basket, and he's patient enough to do that.
You need a clone. You need a clone Kawhi.
Yeah.
And put him on the other team. Like that's the type of dude that can guard Kawhi. Is that kind of strong? Yeah. I mean, maybe it's a Marcus Smart type guy who's strong in that sense, or won't get pushed around. But that's a great point, Seth. And the Mikal Bridges in the world. I'm trying to think more in the Western Conference because we all know the Nets aren't going to make it to the far enough to play them in the playoffs. But like those types of skinny, lanky dudes can't guard him. It's going to be really tough. Who would be a fun matchup for him though? Would be Jalen Williams in Oklahoma City. J-Dub is wing Jalen. strong, stocky dude. Like that's a fun matchup, Oklahoma City and the LA Clippers. Like I think that could be a really fun series that I hope we get maybe in the playoffs if everybody's healthy. But I think there are some stuff, but it's hard. It's hard to find a dude that can hold up against him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why he's damn near MVP level right now. Like it's something you got to talk about. Like when you look at the way Kawhi's playing, there needs to be more hype for him. If he stays healthy all year, there's Clippers continue to rise in the standings.
Yeah. Defensively, again, they're able to switch. James Harden, everybody's, it's a big thing with James Harden. Is he going to defend? Is he going to buy in? I actually think they've used him pretty well. I mean, he comes in, he's the dig guy a lot on doubles. He uses his hands really well. They don't mind him guarding a big here and there. Mo, like, are they doing anything unique, or is this just every single guy there doing a good job of guarding their guy?
I think I think it's a little bit of both. I think the most important thing is like, look, he's got two perimeter defenders that he plays with, and Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. So he's, you can hide him more easily on guys. And we've always known, like, hey man, put him on a big. Like, hide him on a big dude for the most part, and you'd be fine. And he'll do a good job in terms of what you're saying, digging, helping, and doing those types of things and whatnot. Like, it ain't always going to be perfect. There are going to be games where it's like, Harden doesn't look interested at all on defense, but they have enough behind him defensively that it really won't be so catastrophic as it was on other teams and other situations that he was on. They have so much defensive versatility across the board. I mean, Seth talking about Zubac's rim protection. We know the stories with Kawhi. We know Paul George is a damn good defender. Like right there, that's three guys in the starting lineup that all can cover for James. And I think they're in a good position.
Also.
And
with
Terrence
that.
Man, yeah.
And man, I mean, man. So they got, four guys that they fully are covered with, in that sense. You can survive with one bad defender. And to be honest, when you have four guys defending like that, it tends to bleed into you trying a little harder. And it's shown. And he's done a good job. Like, give him credit. He's done a great job fitting in with this team. And the vibes are immaculate on this team. Who'd have thought the Clippers would be a good vibes team?
You mentioned the lower usage, Dave, and I know, Mo, you always hate it when we semi give a guy a pass for mediocre defensive effort because of their offensive load. But I mean, he's got, he between playmaking and scoring, he's using 15-20% fewer possessions this year. There's got to be more energy left for just being engaged on defense, so he can be merely a bad defender, not an apocalyptic defender, which is sort of, for a lot of these guys, is sort of, you get to bad, and then maybe for Devin Booker you go past that and become good. But like, let's ask for achievable things for Harden, and just be attentive and in scheme and and engaged, and like you say, Mo, let the other guys kind of take the heavier lifts on defense, and we'll be fine.
I mean, look, for Harden though, it's very much been about attention and activity and just caring even a little bit, right? So, good to see him doing that. Halfway point of the season, guys. It snuck up on us. We just kind of arrived here, and most teams in that 38 to 40 game played range. I thought it was a good time to check in on the MVP race over at The Athletic. Seth Partnow, he did his MVP tiers a little bit early, I would say, because he did it last week. But Seth, you have an interesting top five, man. This is a very interesting top five. No Jason Tatum in your top five. How are you doing that one?
I mean, Tatum is an interesting case, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit more. He's a sort of a classic. There are other guys on his team sort of stealing shine from him a little bit. I mean, I think Derek White justifiably getting all-star buzz, and Kristaps Porzingis has been absolutely spectacular for them. I don't know if Porzingis has been the best player on the Celtics, but he's been the most important player on the Celtics. And his health, we talked about Kawhi's health. Porzingis's health is one of those swing things in what the playoffs look like going into it. Is if he's healthy and playing this effectively on both ends for Boston, I think that they're the fairly substantial favorites to come out of the East.
Mo, do you?
Yeah, I
agree with
don't
this,
think
that
there's a-
Porzingis.
Yeah, no, I Porzingis is the most important player, but he wouldn't be the MVP of that team. Like for me, it does all the reason why he's important is because we know what Tatum's going to do. Right? Like Tatum is the guy for them, right? And that's the important thing. He makes Tatum's job easier. And by the way, that whole Boston team is top 6, unbelievable. Like I think there's no question they have the best starting lineup, I think, in the league with everything that they do, the best defensive backcourt. Porzingis is doing a great job on both ends of the floor. Like I think they're, Tatum and Brown, it's solid on both. Like it's just a damn good team, I think, with that. And it's because it's so spread out and there is so much talent on there. It is actually understand why Tatum wouldn't be in the top 5 of the MVP race, it sets MVP tiers and whatnot because of that. It's so spread with who's getting shots and the way they kind of are playing. I like it. I mean, their end of game offense needs some work, but that's a whole other story for another time. But I think they are, I'm with Seth, like massive favorites. Like they're a tier above everybody else in the Eastern Conference. I don't know who touches them in the East if they're fully healthy going into the playoffs.
Yeah, it's tough for Tatum, right? Because he's the best player, but that group is such high level. I mean, they have 6 starters.
I mean,
Drew Holiday, look at what the way that they're employing him on defense is very unique. And I mean, that's a guy that he's making a huge change to their team, and it has a huge effect on games on that end. I mean, I think that that's a fair assessment, Seth. I mean, people are going to take it as a knock on Tatum, but really it's more of a statement to just how damn good that team is. I mean, our expectations for the Celtics right now, at least for me, I mean, I expect them to get to the finals.
I mean, the other thing too, though, like Derek White's the second most important guy on that team. That's the other thing. And it's not a knock on Tatum. They're not going to the finals if they don't have Tatum, like period, full stop. Like that team's not going to be good enough if they lost to the Pacers and TJ McConnell without Tatum in the game. But they've also, every time they have one of those guys missing, it tends to be a little bit of a step back for them. But White's importance is huge too, just in the backcourt. Like that is the most impressive defensive backcourt I've seen in a very long time with Holiday and White. And I'll have something coming out on The Athletic pretty soon on Boston. And their defense, because you're right. Like they're actually very creative defensively. And you guys know I've been begging for teams to be more creative on that end of the floor. And Boston is doing it with all their guys.
Yeah, some of their zone stuff has just been absolutely fascinating to watch in the NBA. Another guy, Seth, that missed your cut, Luka Doncic. I'm a little surprised he didn't make your top 5. I mean, he's having a great year. They're winning games. He's putting up numbers that are just kind of, I mean, it feels like a video game.
In my defense, the Mavs have not, I think, lost since I wrote that. So their record is a little. I believe they were at best in the play-in spots when I wrote that, and so that was they're
still in the play-in. So
yeah, okay,
yeah.
So it is it's always a little bit controversial.
How much right there?
Yeah, how much to take? I mean, they did get beat by the Jawless Grizz last night. It's always a bit controversial how much team success should play into like MVP consideration, and I think it's you're right to consider it somewhat. And so, like you look at where they are, and then you look at where the guys I had in the top 5 were. In sort of reverse order were Kawhi, Giannis, Jokic, Embiid, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean, those guys are all like top 2, top 3 seeds on top 2, top 3 seeds, and like the driving force on top 2, top 3 seeds. Now, some of it is talent around them, but it's also to, to get into those situations, that means you're winning games both in that group and against Boston and the other top teams in the league, and those wins are harder. And so the guys on those teams are assisting their teams to get those harder wins.
No, the who you beat matters, I think, in this conversation a little bit, which is funny because you could probably use that to ding Joel Embiid as well, who's second on your list. But the fact that the Mavs are 8-12 against teams that are above 500 is a little bit problematic in that regard, and I think team success matters in the NBA. I think you can make a big difference in that sense. And I think, look, the Mavs are going to be fine and they're rolling. I haven't felt like Luka, as great as he is, and he's averaging career high in points and everything and all of that stuff, I just haven't felt like his impact on the league has been that MVP caliber type of stuff. And it's crazy because he is shooting a career high from three. He's finally hitting a decent 3-point percentage, which is something that we haven't seen in a very long time with him. And I think that's actually ever. And I think that's a big one, but I just don't feel like there's an impact with what he has had in terms of other years where I felt like he was more impactful around the league, where we were like, holy shit. This year it's not been so much. There's so many other guys that get the holy shit moments. And I think that matters in the MVP conversation.
I mean, it is as much as people want to complain about narratives in awards. I think the MVP is one where the narrative, it's rightly included in the award. I think that it is, these awards, and we talked about this quite a bit over the years, they should tell the story of the season. When I kick it back and I think about the year that Russ won the MVP with the triple-double, which in hindsight, oh yeah, totally fine with that. It was an amazing season for him. In the moment, I thought Kawhi was the MVP. But in hindsight, it's like, no, that kind of tells the story of that season. I'm okay with it. And I know I see Seth's face because I know
In
that
hindsight, I still think Kawhi was the, but
it still told a story. And so, like, Mo, I think that you're onto something there, at least with the way I feel about it. Not necessarily with my process, but I try to take those feelings into account when I'm looking at this stuff. So we talked about Kawhi, and he was 5th on your list, Seth. Go ahead, Mo.
Just one more point with the Luka thing. This also might be just a product of us being tired of Luka constantly being the guy that everybody thought was going to win the MVP and not over the past few years. And there was always that kind of waiting for him moment, and that might be unfair on him, but that might be what's also kind of the prejudice a little bit of the narrative. But it's not like he's doing anything we haven't seen him do before.
Right. 4th on your list, you've got Giannis. The struggles in Milwaukee. I mean, it's funny to say the struggles in Milwaukee, and they're the 2 seed right now if the playoffs were to start. But they're not. This is not the same Bucks that we've kind of become accustomed to. They're not dominant defensively like they used to be, but the offense that they can roll out there is pretty incredible. But you got Giannis 4th, Jokic 3rd. I can't really I don't have any bones to pick there. I think that both of their teams just haven't been as good as you want. Jokic, part of that is Jamal Murray kind of in and out of the lineup. They've had some injury issues, but the Nuggets are sleepwalking a little bit.
I'm not sure I'd use sleepwalking. I'd say they're in 3rd gear.
They're a machine.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not the sleepwalking, but they're a machine. And I don't know if Jokic can win another MVP. If they're going to just make their wins look so easy. We'll see what things look like in the next few months. But the top 2 I'm very interested in. Joel Embiid is averaging like 35 a game. And he's been ridiculous. And then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is, I just think that this is a continuation of what he started last season. And now they're winning games. Shai, it feels like Shai's going to just win this MVP as long as Oklahoma City stays on this path.
I mean, I think that first of all, those two in a tier by themselves at the top of the race. I mean, I think there's, I knew those two would be in the top tier when I started the exercise, but I was surprised when I started to get into some of the metrics, how much separation there is between those two guys. And then the next two, Jokic and Giannis, both of whom are having like excellent seasons, but not the just the peaks that the two guys who you're talking about have hitting. And then I think the like among other differentiator, just the fact that even before Embiid has missed the last couple of games, Shea has missed only one. I think missed only one game this season. And yeah, okay, he's played 6 games more at the time I wrote that. 6 games isn't a bunch, but you extract that out to 12 or 15 games, and that's a meaningful difference. And so even before we start to quibble on a per possession impact, where I might still lean Shea this year, just in terms of how much OKC gets to play against scrambled defense because of his ability to break the first line of defense down while not turning the ball over. Just makes life so easy for so other people. Then, okay, he may be not the greatest possession to possession defender, in part because of how much he has the ball, but he leads the league in steals by just a massive margin. And it's that makes up for a lot. If you're carving out, if you're zeroing out one extra opposing possession a game, that's a pretty good. You make up for a lot of mediocre defensive possessions that way.
I'm glad you brought up the turnovers because Seth, you alerted me to this. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander hasn't had a game with more than 3 turnovers since October. This guy has the ball in his hands so much. And he just doesn't waste. You don't lose possessions with your best player on the court. And man, I can hammer the Warriors about this because they have never valued the basketball, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has not had more than 3 turnovers in a basketball game since the 30th of October, game 4 of the season. That's absurd.
And there's a lot of guys who have been big scorers who have done so, not turning the ball over a lot. They've very much tended to be more pull-up jump shooter types. Your Dirk Nowitzki, DeMar DeRozan, a couple of Carmelo Anthony seasons sort of come to mind of that. He's also doing this as the guy who gets drives. He has the most drives in the league by a decent margin. He's when I wrote the story, he was first in total drives and 45th in turnovers on drives. And it's just so he's not just creating offense for himself. He's like I said, he's breaking the defense down. And usually that's a situation where turnovers occur and you're okay with that. That's a cost you're willing to pay. But you're not even having to pay that cost with Shai this year.
No, that's the thing. With his usage so high on that team, it's to have that low of a turnover margin is absurd. You would expect to have a game here and there with 4 or 5 turnovers every now and then, just a bad game like that. But when he has a bad game, it's not the turnovers that are the problem, and that's kind of the absurdness with it. I think the difference when we talk about, and I want to piggyback on Seth's point about him making everybody's life easier. He's winning Chet Holmgren the Rookie of the Year award. Chet's able to really kill, and it's not because he's definitely talented with all that stuff too. He gets the most open shots because defenses are trying to stymie those Shai drives, and that leads to open looks for everybody, and he's kind of really benefited from that. And I think that's the big thing, and that's why I kind of have him a tier above Embiid, and the smallest of tiers, in that sense. And Embiid's been great. He's averaging career high in assists. He's moving the ball really well. And I think he's benefited from Maxi's rise, whereas Shai is the reason why other guys have benefited in Oklahoma City. And I think that's kind of the small delineation there. And I think that's sort of the difference between the two, and why I would probably go 1-2 the way Seth has it in that list. And I think that's the stuff that's most interesting. But at the end of the day too, and Dave, I got to give you credit, man. September, you were calling Shai for MVP. I don't know if you said it on the pod or if you said it in our pre-show stuff, and I started yelling at you about it's way too early and whatnot and things like that. But give your credit, take your victory laps.
Well,
but it's also
I don't know about victory. But it's the narrative.
I'll take one.
Take one.
Who told you? Who told you years ago? Who told you guys years ago?
True.
Shai's gonna be a star.
What's incredible to me, look, he's averaging almost 32 a game, 32 points a game. Super low volume 3-point shooting for a guard in the NBA now. 3.5 threes on average a game. And he's still averaging 31.5 points a game. I mean, that's just incredible. The guy scores at every level. And this is different than Embiid, right? Because Embiid, dominant in the post. We know that, he shoots threes and he's good from the mid-range, but he's not attacking you in the same ways. He's not set. I mean, a lot of Embiid's playmaking comes out of the post and drawing the double. And it's great for that he recognizes it. But Shai is actively creating a lot of the advantages for other people too.
It should be noted that Embiid is having by some margin his best playmaking season, but that's from a baseline of he's being a low playmaking, high turnover guy. He's better in that regard, but he's still like for his offensive involvement, he's on the high end of the turnovers to the same degree that Shai is on the low end.
So barring health, right? Is the MVP race over?
No, come on.
I mean, like, no, but are these the contestants? Let's say, is this the race? Is this it's Embiid, it's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, it's Jokic, it's Giannis, it's Kawhi, or can someone sneak in there?
I think that you mentioned Luka. I think LeBron is having like the season LeBron is having. Like the next group down is okay. Tatum has to be stupendous and Boston's still good. And then some other guys, LeBron and Luka and maybe one or two others, like if their team starts to come up, if the Warriors go on I don't think any of us think this has happened. I think we all kind of think they're done. But if the Warriors go on a run and get up to like the 5th or 6th seed because behind Steph, like he gets into the conversation. So I think that for the most part, the guys who are on the outside of that group looking in, it's as much about their teams putting runs together to give them the platform to be in that conversation, as far as I'm concerned.
It's also January 10th. Like if somebody has just an unbelievable second half, like you said, we're at the halfway mark. Like if somebody has just an unbelievable second half, that's going to win them the MVP, right? And this stuff can change relatively quick. A hot 3 weeks from somebody, and we're all of a sudden going like, holy shit, De'Aaron Fox goes completely ballistic and has the Kings rising in the standings or something. We're going to start looking at that. And so on. So we'll have to see how it kind of plays out. I would just say first half MVP, I think, is pretty solid. And, we'll see how it kind of continues the rest of the way.
Cade Cunningham comes back from injury and the Pistons win 4 games and we name him MVP maybe because that is one of the worst basketball teams.
Three. Don't be unrealistic. 3 games.
Hey, if you guys ever want to do something really, really funny, go look at that Bobcats team that set the loss record and look at that roster and compare it to the Pistons roster and tell me how many more guys the Bobcats had than this Pistons team have. I mean, it just makes you sad about the state of basketball in Detroit. It is, man, I randomly had that thought yesterday and I looked and I said, wow, that Bobcats team had a few guys.
See, I think the Pistons are underperforming their talent.
Better.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. I mean, I can only judge the talent on how it's performed.
And that might be more of a coaching thing, hiring a coach that you didn't want to coach for a while and you kept raising the prices is probably not a good deal.
That's not a good way to negotiate. Anyway, it's a good place to end the show. For Mona Keel and Seth Partnow, I'm Dave DeFord, and this has been Nerder, She Wrote, on the Athletic NBA Show.